Hey everybody, this is Jack Allwild with another Money-ish episode. Today we have Faysal Alkharaz on to discuss life in the country of Jordan. Faysal, welcome to the show.
Hello, no, it's a pleasure being here. I truly appreciate you contacting me, and I'm excited to see what this episode has in store.
The reason I invited you on, my brother and I, we do a podcast called the Brothers on Books podcast. We recently read the book, The Nomad Capitalist. It's about a man from Ohio that actually gave up his citizenship. And one of his critiques of Americans in general are that they are not very cultured. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity to invite some people on from different countries to discuss their personal finances and just life in general. So with that, I mean, do you have to go into an office or do you work from home?
Okay, so I'll let you know. I'll give you the boring details as well, just so you
Okay,
know. So
sure,
I'm
sure.
I'm a person who kind of enjoys having a routine, some kind of structure to his day. So my day is as follows. Now it's the season of Ramadan, and for those who don't know what Ramadan is, it's a holy month where we fast, and it's a very spiritual month. So this one is a bit different. However, usually what I do is I wake up at, let's say, 5:30, 6 a.m., get my day started. I do the chores, some chores around the house, and I think this is really important as um, it helps you know that you've accomplished some stuff before you even get into the technical and the very, let's say, difficult tasks. So this keeps the momentum going. Prepare breakfast, prepare lunch to take to work, and after that, I just, I head to work, work at the office, although I do have the option to work remotely. In the office, it's pretty chill. It's So what I do is I'm a software engineer, and I work for one of the biggest organizations in the MENA region. And what they do is that they're focused more on the financial payment solutions and providing those solutions to banks and financial service providers. And so pretty much I code all day, have a bunch of meetings, and afterwards I head to the gym. And sometimes I work a little bit on the podcast. I stay a bit late at work, do some stuff for the podcast, sort out some meetings, maybe work on some promotional activities, whatever it is. Afterwards, I hit the gym, head back home, eat, clean the dishes, and after that, it's pretty much it. It's 10 p.m. at that point, and I'm pretty knackered, so just head to bed.
Okay, so in America, we've become very accustomed to using cars to get from point A to point B. Well, what's the car usage like in Jordan and where you are?
Yes, so this one is a bit tricky, I am a person who does not really enjoy driving. It's not my favorite thing to do, given how stressful it could be sometimes with all the traffic. Now, the issue with Amman, so I live in the capital, it's pretty congested, just like any
Mhm.
other capital you'd see. And the car usage is insane. Now, you'd think that, Jordan, being in the Middle East, maybe it doesn't have the strongest economy in the world. People would depend more on public transportation. However, this is not the case. A lot of people have cars. I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't want to give like just a disclaimer, I'm not here to give like actual data. I'm just giving
Mhm.
approximations. Let's say there are around 2 cars per household. So that's a lot if
Wow.
you think about it. And how many people, what is the population like in Jordan? We have, I think it's around 10 million at this point. Maybe 4 million are concentrated in Amman. So you
Wow.
can imagine what it's like. Recently the government have been doing a really good job at improving the public transportation in Jordan. They had a huge construction and maintenance done on the roads. So they have lanes just for buses, and those are like very fast buses that rarely ever stop.
Uh-huh.
So that pretty much it helped a little bit with the traffic. However, people are still not accustomed to it, or maybe um, it's still a work in progress. A lot of people are still dependent on cars or Ubers, or it's more of a local application. It's called Kareem, or even taxis, or just the local buses instead of using those speed lane buses.
Uh-huh. So if I mean two cars per household, that I mean that does sound like a
Mhm.
lot. Do households typically finance the cars in any way, or are they paying for them in cash?
So that's a thing that I'm unsure of now. From
Hmm.
what I've heard, it's around like 50-50. Some people
Okay.
own their cars, other people they get loans to purchase their cars, and that comes from like a personal experience, not something I face, but
Hmm.
something I've heard around while being in the gym, being in the office. Some people do get loans. Others they buy the car from the bank, and I believe they have like a life insurance on it. So if in case they face an unfortunate incident and they pass away, the person who will get this car, so that's like the son or the wife, that's passed by will, they will not have the burden of paying off the car's insurance, or sorry,
Hmm.
paying off the car's debts.
So, um, so next question. So if they are taking out loans, it isn't. Can you tell us a little bit about how in Islam the views are towards interest? Because I thought there were some rules.
There are actually, and I'm not the most experienced person to talk about this. However, I can give you like my general opinion, or
Hmm.
at least my opinion about this matter, and maybe dive a little bit into Islam. So, basically, as you know, interest it could be a burden on someone, especially with if they were fluctuating. It could damage the person a lot, the person who borrowed that loan. Especially nowadays, if you take a look at the economy and how fluctuating it is, and how the interest rates are constantly changing, those with loans, they're suffering a little bit. Not gonna lie, if not a lot. Now, the idea of loans, it is against Islam. However, this is how I guess like most banks operate. They depend on interest to make money, to get profit, to get money into the business and invest it somewhere else. And that's why there are some people who avoid getting those kind of loans, and they move, or they're more keen towards dealing with Islamic banks that we have here in Jordan and even across the Middle East region. Those Islamic banks, they have something which I personally believe is still called interest. However, they call it murabaha, which means what the bank tries to do is, first of all, they have the loan is a bit different. So you pay interest based on the principal. And as the principal decreases, the amount of interest that you need to pay decreases. So that is it is kind of easier on the person to handle those kinds of loans, and I think the interest rate is fixed; it does not change.
Okay.
Um, Usually, those banks they avoid the use of term interest because it goes against like Islam, and they use the term. It's not what did they call it? It's murabaha. It's not faida. It's just a bunch of like Arabic technical terms that they use.
Hmm.
I think it's still the same because, in principle, if you take more than you charge that person, um, or more than that person borrows, if you charge them more, that's still considered interest. I think
Uh-huh.
the way banks or Islamic banks are supposed to operate, and that's hypothetically speaking, and I've only recently understood the basic principle of it. So those banks, they should be with you. They should profit when you profit, and they should suffer from the losses when you lose. That's the way the banks should work. So they're with you when you win, and they're with you when you lose.
So it's more like a
So if you don't,
partner
yeah.
type of relationship.
Yes, but apparently those or this scheme or protocol, it should encourage investment a lot. Now, a lot of people, they are hesitant towards taking risks, taking loans from banks and venturing into a new idea because of the effects or the negative consequences of not being able to pay off those debts and pay off those interests. However, with the Islamic Bank, it kind of takes off the burden of losing. It tells you it's okay to lose, and we're going to be here to help you win, and we want you to win. But that means it's extra work on the bank because they become very, very specific on who they fund.
Mhm.
But there are more people who are willing to take risks and generate ideas, I guess, in this way.
Interesting. So have you ever personally taken out a loan like that?
I did not so
Okay.
far, and it's not in my intention to take
Hmm.
any loans.
Gotcha.
In my opinion, if you don't have the money, you don't go for you don't spend extra. You
Hmm.
try to save as much as you can. Now, I know there are some families who cannot sustain or do not have a sustainable income. They do not have a fixed income, so it's hard for them to live. It's hard for them to survive. That's why they end up taking those loans. Um, and there are actually some projects that do help people in need taking loans. However, after I've seen just how much pressure it puts on the person who borrows the loan, I got discouraged. So as you know, there are like companies that are considered to be
Hmm.
microfinance companies.
Hmm.
They could either be like a subset of a bank, or they could be a separate entity. Those companies, they try to give people who are in need of money to fund their own small businesses or local businesses at least. Those people usually require a small amount of investment. Let's say it's 5 to 10K. However, if you take a look at the scheduling plan, they have to pay the loans within like a month or two. They have a weekly payment. The interest rates are high. The charges are high. The penalties, it's a lot. So, are you really doing better by taking this loan? I'm not sure.
Hmm.
It's a risk that it should be a calculated risk at least.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's something, I mean, for Americans, I mean, the typical American is taking out a lot of debt to kind of pull that consumption forward to the present. So a lot of people aren't used to, saving up and then spending. It's more like spend and then pay off. So
Yeah.
what about for schooling?
Mm.
Do
What about it?
people, yeah, I mean, because yeah, I mean, student loan debt's a huge thing in America.
Mm.
Is that how is college, I guess, attended, and yeah, what's the schooling like in Jordan?
Yeah, sorry, before we dive into that topic, it
Mhm.
seems like, and based on readings as well, the idea of credit and credit cards, it's apparently what is damaging the US. Is that correct?
I mean, I think the number one asset on the U.S. government's balance sheet is student loan debt. So,
Oh, wow.
and it kind of started, it seems, as you know, college was very expensive, and the intention was, we want to make it more affordable for more people. So, let's loan money out to, these students and let them go to school. And while it sounds good in principle, what happens is, the schools start charging a lot more because the government's going to pay for it. And it's kind of this bad cycle where, different parties have skin in the game and others don't. And yeah, and I still remember, my first week on at college, there's a lot of credit card companies trying to get you to sign up for credit cards, and I don't think a lot of people really understand how that interest is calculated and when you start incurring fees and whatnot. So yeah, it's a major problem. Financial literacy is a major problem here. So
Yeah, no, in Jordan, it's a bit different. Now, I studied abroad personally, so I didn't really go through the experience of
mhm,
what it's like to study at university in Jordan. Now, when it comes to schools, there are both public and private schools, just like in the US.
mhm,
The public schools are not so good, to be honest. It's not, at least it's not as good as the private schools, and even the private schools, as just, and I think the same applies to every country. You know, you have different ranges of schools: the top tier, the ones that are super expensive, the boarding schools, etc. Now,
mhm,
I studied. I thank God for, you know, having the opportunity to study in a private school, undertaking the international baccalaureate system, and going out to study abroad. However, not everyone has that privilege. Um, Public schools, they're unfortunately, it's a bit, the standards are a bit lower. You can't expect much. Now, some people do graduate from there and they end up doing really, really well. However, you know, I truly believe that teachers lead by example, and I think if the kids see that the teachers are not putting in the effort, then they won't put in the effort as well. They're slacking off. If
mhm.
education is not the number one priority in those kids' mind, which I truly understand why it's not, they won't take school seriously. I mean, I guess those kids, they have other concerns. They might have financial struggles. It's hard for them to stay in school. They just want a distraction in life, so they don't have a fixed goal. They don't have proper guidance. Maybe their dad is away. Maybe their dad is constantly working, trying to provide food for the family, to put food on the table, regardless the circumstances. But when it comes to universities, they are also the same. There are public and private universities.
Mhm.
They're relatively affordable for the average, for an average income family. They're affordable. I believe it's around like three. It depends on your on what you want to study. However,
Mhm.
let's take an average of 4K per semester. That's 8K per year, per
Okay.
academic year. In comparison to the US, that's heaven, right?
Yeah.
US is it's pretty expensive, and in Jordan they do offer scholarships as well. Some universities they do, which is really, really good, and they give you, and they also provide you the opportunity to do this thing called Erasmus, where you go abroad for a year or a semester and you study in another university in another country, and they also provide you with you know, your allowance, your monthly allowance. So it's a great opportunity for kids to get exposure and to have some kind of dependence, to be independent, not rely on parents a lot. um, the
So
public, you know, I'm not sure about the quality, like
mhm.
which one is better. It all depends on your field of study. However, generally speaking, we do have some good universities that are well known across the Middle East region.
Cool. So where did you end up going to school for college, and how did you decide on that spot?
Okay, so for university, it was a tough one. So I applied to both Canada and the UK. And at that time, I wasn't sure I wanted to study computer science. However, I took both the best and worst case scenario. When I was applying for universities, you know, my dad and I came up with a plan, and we said, okay, we're gonna hope for the best, that I get a really, really high grade, and we're gonna expect the worst, which is me getting a very average or maybe a very low grade that would barely get me into any international university. So we picked, um, from Canada, I applied to two universities. Those are Toronto and British Columbia. Got accepted into both. For Scotland, sorry, for the UK, I took the top or the best university I could get into, given my given the subjects that I've took in in high school. And then I applied for one that is top to middle, two that are middle, and one that is bottom, like a very low ranked university.
Mhm.
thank the Lord, things went well. I got accepted into 4 out of 5, and I ended up going into St. Andrews, one of the top universities in the UK and probably the top university in Scotland.
Very cool. And did I take it you studied computer science there?
Yes, I did. Yeah,
Yeah. How
tough
did
one though.
your
Tough
what
effort.
did you was your English all like going into college? Was your English already super good? I mean, your English is phenomenal. Um, and
Oh, yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, it had to be good because when you go into university, you need to apply for an IELTS, the IELTS system, or a TOEFL. I think it's called a TOEFL. And those are standardized English tests where they test your speaking, comprehension, writing, I think, yeah, and listening skills. So they test all these skills, and you need to get a specific grade, and that grade also fluctuates depending on the university. However, we in Jordan, and especially the community that I've lived in, we've had exposure to the Western media at a very young age, and we've been taught English at a very young age, and that of course goes to, and I thank my family, my constant family support, putting me in a great kindergarten and a very good university from the very good school from the very start. So they helped me set the foundation. Now my English was not very good at the beginning. I think even growing up, I mean, I'd say up until the ninth grade, my English was average. And when I've noticed that it's average, I started working on it through reading, listening to um, more English content. And at university, it just picked up because I was practicing it a lot. And a lot of people at my university were posh or even very well educated. And their English was so good that by the end of the day, you are forced, whether you want it or not, consciously or subconsciously learn from them.
Mhm. Hmm. Were there any types of apps or programs you used on the side to help your English?
No, not really. I
Okay.
mean, for languages, I guess I used the apps for when I was trying to learn German.
Okay.
Other than that, it's pretty much watching TV, reading the newspaper, reading books, reading articles, communicating with people, etc.
Yeah, because I mean, definitely like in Europe, like it's pretty common to speak multiple languages, and they're kind of flabbergasted. Us Americans don't speak more than just English. But yeah, and I've been trying on like Babbel for German. So are you fluent in German too?
No, we took one
No.
semester at school, and then the
Okay.
school gave up because we weren't. We just wanted to watch TV the whole time. We asked the teacher, we begged the teacher. We used it as a free lecture. We used it as an opportunity to do whatever we want. I enjoyed it, and given more time, I would like to learn more languages. If I think German is one I'm interested in. However, now with things going the way they are, I see Mandarin being a very popular language soon.
Interesting. So I guess so that's all very cool. The next thing I thought we should touch on is insurances. If you could just give an idea of what type of insurances you do have, and maybe so one thing that's pretty common here is we get our medical insurance through our employers.
Mm,
Not always, but a large majority of the people have their health insurance through their employer. But we don't, for example, have our car insurance through our employer. So I don't know if you could touch
yeah.
on insurances that you have and how you get them.
Yeah, the insurance I have is actually from work as well.
Okay.
Now, with work, it's a bit of a scheme that they have, and I'm not sure if it applies to all companies. However, from the companies that I've interviewed, it seems to be this kind of the same, whether it was in Jordan or even in the UK. Health insurance is always paid by the company. In my case, at least, I pay for the insurance. I pay, or sorry, like the company takes a certain amount from my from my salary, and they pay the insurance. That I think that goes on for a year or a year and a half. After this period of time, you start paying half, and the company pays half, and then 5 years of being in the company, they start paying for the insurance for everything.
Okay.
So I do have a health insurance. Car insurance, we actually pay it on our own, which could be, depending on the car, it could be expensive sometimes, and it could, and given that the salaries, I'm not gonna say they're low. They're sufficient. However, with everything going up and with inflation, it becomes sometimes tough to manage. I think also other types of insurance, like insurance against cancer, that's also paid by me. So it really depends on how far you want to go with it and what you want to get out of the insurance. So I think the insurance we have, it's actually pretty good. It covers dental expenses as well, up to 150 JDs. Maybe that goes, I think that's like, what, 200? If you multiply it by 0.7, how much is that? So it's, let's say we have 150 times 0.7, which is like the conversion rate into dollars. I think that's 105, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, cool.
So
Yeah, I was looking.
USD
Yeah,
to
look.
JOD.
Yeah, it looked like, yeah, that's about 0.7. Yeah, it looked like they were, 1.4 USD to
It's
1
actually, sorry,
JD.
it's 200. $200 because I have to divide it by 0.7. Yeah. But
Okay.
I actually think it's quite helpful having one. I've definitely used mine for physiotherapy, for my eye infection. Uh, I never knew. At first, I was a bit hesitant on using the insurance because it was just a new experience and I was not used to it. However, now I do use it more comfortably, but I still feel bad sometimes for using it. I have no idea why. Just because it's the feeling of not paying after you get the service. It's unusual.
You
Guess it
mean
just takes some time.
you mean you're kind of uneasy because you don't know the price beforehand, or is it because, yeah, I get.
It's because I don't. Usually you go to the doctor, you end up paying, right? With the insurance, it's you go to the doctor and you do not pay. And it's a weird feeling of just going out of the clinic and not paying anything.
Okay. So
However, it is a bit of a relief.
yeah, it's
Not gonna lie.
weird in a good way.
But insurance in the US, that's crazy. I've heard a lot of stories from people, either through the podcast that I make, or through the people I've interviewed, or through friends that I've met at uni. In the US, it's crazy. And I've also done, I remembered in international baccalaureate, I took business or management as one of the subjects. And for my internal system, so we had an internals and externals. Internals were more like submissions that are corrected internally, and the official graders, they take samples from different schools and see whether the teachers were being biased or not. So for my internal, I had to do a research, and I investigated Valiant Pharmaceuticals' ethical approach with their customers, or at least with their patients, because the price of medicine, and those are medicine that could be bought really cheaply from other places, they can go up to like 200% or a 300% increase. And for me, it's like that person or that patient is in need of that medication, and you're just making it very, very difficult for them to obtain it. So I'm not sure. Like, I remember also talking to one of my friend who had migraines, and she said that it does cost her quite a decent amount of money to get those pills from the US, and it's even harder for her to get those pills from the UK's National Health Service. So it's a bit messy. I guess it's after COVID that everything got messed up, right?
Yeah, maybe, yeah, some supply chain issues. Interesting. So does Jordan have, like, is it like a one pay system? Like, is it a socialized medicine essentially?
Uh, can you elaborate on that?
So are there separate, I guess what I'm asking is, are there separate private insurance companies, or is it just, is
Mm.
there like a government insurance that is kind of paying those medical expenses?
No, no, it's there are different companies, and
Okay.
depending on how much you can pay, it's how
Mhm.
much you get out of them. And
Okay.
some of my friends, they work for the Arab Bank or any other bank. Some of them work for organizations like the Big Four, PwC, Ernest and Young. They
Mhm.
get they get a different insurance than we do. I'm not sure
Okay.
if it's better or worse, but it is different, I can tell.
Okay. Well, and then I guess here's another question. If you are unemployed, is there any sort of like safeguard insurance for those people?
Hmm. So if if you were fired by your employer,
Mhm.
then you get a minimum of 3 months worth of your salary. So
Okay.
that's I'm not sure what the right terminology for it is, but what it basically does is it helps you cover your costs, cover anything you need until you find another job.
Hmm.
And for every year of service, you get an additional month of wage by your employer. If that's if and only if they fire you. If you leave your job and you're unemployed and could not find anything else, then unfortunately you're pretty much
Uh-huh.
left without money, and you
Interesting.
have to go and find another source of income. Because most companies, they don't, I think most companies don't have those kind of insurances. I'm not sure. This is not my area of expertise.
Uh-huh. Hmm. Interesting. Do you,
But then
uh-huh.
it's, yeah, sorry, continue. Sorry.
No, no, I was gonna get, just ask, do you get the sense that sometimes if like the longer a person stays, that if a company wanted to fire that person, they would have to pay them more and more money because I think you said it's like a month for every year they've been there. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that is
So it
correct.
kind of, yeah, I don't, there's some interesting mechanics there.
Yeah,
Um,
so now it's sometimes it's a game. I feel like it's a game that both the employee and the employer could play.
mhm.
Um, so let's take different scenarios into consideration. Let's say the employer was being annoying and they were being uh, unfair to that employee, um, that they forced him to quit. That way, they don't have to pay him
Right,
because he quit
exactly.
and they did not fire him. So
Yep.
that's one thing they could do. Now, let's say the employer was, sorry, the employee was being a bit unethical in the workplace. They could remain unethical in the workplace and until they force the employer to fire them.
Hmm.
And sometimes the employer, they that's the way I'm thinking at the moment. I'm just trying to think what I would do if I were an employer. Maybe I would keep them in service if their service is coming to an end, like they're retiring soon.
Hmm.
If not, you'll have to take the hit because you just have to weigh out the pros and cons over here.
Hmm.
You do not want to affect your working environment. You do not want other employees getting negatively affected by that employee. So it's a lot to think about, I guess, and it's a very exhausting game if it turns out to be a game that one of either ends are playing.
Hmm. Yeah, that dynamic actually sounds similar to in America because yeah, if you just leave on your own free will, you're not really given anything or entitled to unemployment benefits. But if they fire you, typically you would get, not always, but sometimes they'll give you like a payout, like a severance, and you would be entitled to those unemployment benefits. So, but you touched a
But
little bit on thinking of retirement, people getting to retire. Like, so what is the retirement age, and are you guys, out of every one of your paychecks, are they taking money out to put into some social safety net for retirement benefits?
Yeah, in Jordan, the retiring age, if I'm not mistaken, I can't pinpoint what it actually is, but it must be more than, I think in Europe it's like 60, right? In Jordan, it could be around 65 or
Okay.
something around that is where people typically retire. I don't think we have the luxury as much as people in European countries have to retire early, although
Hmm.
we do have money that is being allocated or put in social security, so that you can get a retirement salary after you finish. However, it's usually not that much. I think you need to calculate it. There is a formula that you could use to know how much you're gonna get after X amount of years of service.
Hmm.
And I think
Okay.
if you serve or work for less than, let's say, Y amount of years, I'm going to give like a vague number, let's say 20 years. If you work or go to retirement before you finish those 20 years, I do not think you get any retirement salary.
Okay. So
I
that's
think that is the
it.
case. Yeah.
Now, are there also like pension programs through private companies, or do they not really do much of that anymore?
So what are pension programs? Sorry.
So a pension would be like a defined benefit program. So like, you working, X number of years at your retirement age, you might be entitled to, two, three, $4,000 a month, something like that. It's like fixed, yeah, fixed benefit as opposed to what America, we used to be more like that on a defined, what they call defined benefit programs or pensions. But now they've kind
Mm.
of shifted it to defined contributions, meaning, working people put money aside each month into like a 401k or some other retirement vehicle, and they're kind of bearing the risk in terms of how to invest that money, um, and
Okay.
yeah, what they choose to do.
Okay, so from my or according to my knowledge, it could go both ways. I think, um, depending on, again, it all depends on the company's policy, but sometimes they do take a percentage out of your salary, and they I think they save it for you. They put it in a
Okay.
savings account for that employee so that they could take it once they retire. Another thing they do, and I think that's something that almost all companies do, they take a percentage of the salary again, and they place that amount in social security so that you can take your money, or you can take a monthly salary when you retire. Now that amount that you take is dependent on a lot of factors, including what your salary was when you, I think, when you finish service, um, at
Mhm.
what age you finished, maybe the amount of years you've served. I cannot remember the
Mhm.
exact variables that you need, but I do remember at least two of them, which is the age at which you retire and how much you, or what was your salary when you applied for retirement, was that those go into, or they get plugged into the formula.
Okay, that makes sense. In terms of, just, I guess, to give listeners a general sense of like your friends and family, the mix between people that work in like the private sector and the public sector, what does that breakdown kind of look like? And what does that look like?
So I don't think I have anyone working in the public sector, maybe just one,
Okay.
at least that I know of.
Uh-huh.
The others, they all work for private companies.
Okay.
And so again, we're talking about big four, big banks like Arab Bank. We're talking about working in Deloitte, working in Microsoft, all those companies. I'm not sure. I don't think I know someone, maybe except one, that works in a public organization, or at least in a governmental organization, maybe,
Uh-huh.
or two.
Interesting. Interesting.
I do have
Okay.
some friends who they are still at university, so I can't count them in this
Uh-huh.
in this ratio.
Uh-huh.
but their dads, at least, they work in public sectors, or they work for the government, or they work for like the just like you have the Central Intelligence of America, we have a similar organization in Jordan, so they work there. So it really depends on. But I think the reason why the population is segmented this way, where there's a very few percentage of people working in the public, is because first of all, private sectors, they always pay more. However, the benefits that you get working in the public sector is these are sometimes better because the government gives you a lot of bonuses. They give you a lot of schemes that could help you and kind of encourage you to work in the sector. But also, I guess it comes from the background that we are in, right? So the kind of things that people study that I know that, the people that I know that they study at university are different from than if I were to come from a different background. Let's say if I were super, super rich, or if I was one of the bottom, like 90% of the population.
Yeah, because I think at least the reputation is the public sector jobs have very cushy benefits, maybe more paid time off. Yeah, just overall seems like better benefits than private companies, and that's kind of, yeah, those competing forces. How much vacation time do you get?
Oh, it's around. So I get 14 days
Okay.
of vacation and 14 days of sick leaves, paid sick leaves.
Okay.
After 5 years of serving, that number jumps up. So it bounces up to 28 days of vacation leave, of paid leaves, and 14 days of sick leaves. I think
Wow.
that's if only applies if you work for the same company for 5 years and more, so 5+.
And what about
So if you think
holiday?
about it,
Yep.
yeah, if you think about it, it might seem like it's not a lot. I do know that people in the UK, at least, they take a bit more. I think it's around 45 days. But that's just I don't know. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I personally don't enjoy taking a lot of time off because it breaks the routine and it's hard to get the rhythm back. It takes a while. It takes at least like 1 to 2 days to get back to that zone, or to that, let's say, level that I was at before taking that vacation, even though taking a vacation after a stressful month or after a stressful year is just the most important thing to do. But yeah, sorry, what was your next question?
I was
You were
just
trying
gonna
to say something.
no, I mean, I think that sounds like a good number of days. I was gonna ask on holidays, and do they give you time off during Ramadan at all?
So during Ramadan, it's actually the working hours they decrease, and that's
Okay.
a law published. It's like a law by the government. So the working hours for me, it's 6 hours a day.
Okay.
So from 9:30 a.m. until 3:30 a.m. And and then we get like holidays. Of course, we have Fridays and Saturdays off, and whenever we have a religious holiday, we do take that off. New Year's, yeah, Christmas, we take, I think, 1 or 2 days off.
Okay.
New Year's, 1 day. Christians take a bit more because they have holidays. So for us, it's the majority of people are Muslims. So the people tend to take, everyone actually takes the Islamic holidays off. However, we Muslims, we do not take days off when it comes to Christian holidays. So for example, Easter is coming. The Christians, they take 1 or 2 days off. Muslims, we remain usually at work. We don't take time off. So yeah, it's I guess it's different from what you have in the US, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Having this kind of like I don't want to call it segregation because that's a very negative word, but that's like that difference in when it comes to religious matters. I think Western countries, they got rid of the idea of I don't know what you call it, like not Islamic, but religious states a long time ago, and they started focusing more on the scientific approach, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's just yeah, it's interesting. I was just seeing that I think the trend is though that there's the world will be majority Muslim because I think it's like for every 100 babies that are born right now, I think it was like 34 are Christian and maybe 33 are Muslim, but of the people dying, there's many more Christians dying right now. So the
Really?
trend, so that'll be kind of interesting to see how
That is very interesting.
that mix in the world will change things. But yeah, it is um cool. So this was
I'm not sure how they calculate it though. Like the way I think about it, like,
mhm,
do they count? So in the Western countries, religion is less is I guess has a weaker effect than it has in more Asian countries, right? Um, so I guess a lot of people might consider themselves to be atheists or might belong to other religions. However, maybe it's something that is recorded on books. Like when it comes to bookkeeping, you're born as a Christian, and you decide to
mhm,
change it when you're older, and when you're I guess of the right mental state or right age to take that decision and to be aware of what decision you're taking. And also, we need to take into consideration that Western countries, the what do we call it? The age demographic is a bit different.
mhm.
I guess you have more elderly than you have young people, like kids and teenagers. While
Yep.
in Asian countries, it's a bit different. Not all Asian countries, but at least in the Middle East, I believe that is the case.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a trend where each household has less kids. Um, and unfortunately, yeah, a lot more divorces and yeah, it's just yeah, we'll see how it
I think
shakes
in
out.
South
I
Korea, and even sorry,
mhm.
yeah.
Well, actually, we read. Oh man, what book was that? I'm not sure, but it was going through how in a lot of the Western countries, a very high. Actually, it might have been a Nomad Capitalist. Um, a very high percentage of children are born to single mothers. And I think in like France,
Mm.
Iceland in particular shocked me because I viewed Iceland as a very stable country, but it was like 2/3 of kids are born to single mothers. But in like Japan and South Korea, it was like only one out of every 66 kids was born to a single mother. So there's definitely something in the culture that's diverging because it was not always like that.
Yeah, I was about to say, like in South Korea, I believe they're starting to pay um, young families or people who get newly married money, like
Hmm.
to encourage them to have kids. So that's kind of like helping them or aiding them
Hmm.
in setting up a stable um, or having at least a stable income to
Hmm.
sustain having a kid. And I think having this kind of sustainability and this kind of uh, help and aid and support from the government will encourage young people to get kids at a younger age and maybe to have even more kids. I think China, they also changed the rules because previously they stated that each family, they're supposed to have one kid unless both parents they come from a family where they have one kid, so they could have two. Nowadays
Hmm.
it's changing a little bit because of the
Yeah.
age demographics. They're trying to focus more on young kids. But again, Finland, that caught me out of the blue, to be honest. It's weird because I also thought it was the same. I think Nordic countries in general, they're more stable, right?
Hmm.
Economically stable, even though Even though another surprising fact, I think I've read that somewhere, but Sweden has a high percentage of suicide, like high suicide rates.
Interesting. Uh-huh.
I'm not sure. I think I need to double check this. Please, guys, double check this before. Just another disclaimer.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess a fun question. So we were talking a little bit about vacation. So like the typical Jordanian family, if they want to get away for a weekend or take a little bit longer trip, what are popular places you guys travel to?
Okay. So that again depends on which, I think, which population you're targeting
Mm-hmm.
in within, the larger population.
Yep.
Let's take the majority to begin with. The
Mm-hmm.
majority of people of low income, they'll try to stay within Jordan, of course. Maybe they'll go to Lebanon if they had the chance. Maybe they'll go to Syria if they had the chance, although that's not always possible given the circumstances and the political situation.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So I guess most families would go on day trips. Let's say they'll either, if people live outside of Amman, they'll move into Amman.
Okay.
And if people live in Amman, they'll maybe go maybe outside of Amman, enjoy nature a little bit more, camp, or maybe set fire and have a barbecue. So it's usually very simple. Kids get like their footballs or kites and they play. They play on the grass or on the street, whatever it was. I guess people don't tend to take luxurious vacations a lot
Mm-hmm.
just because of how expensive it is.
Yep.
Now you might say, well, Jordan has the Red Sea, it has Dead Sea, it has Petra, it has a lot of historical um, sites or even like popular touristic attractions that people could go to. Well, generally speaking, Jordanians, or at least like from what I've seen, a normal vacation, or at least people would usually take a day trip.
Mm-hmm.
An exceptional case would be to go to a historical site where you pay a very low fare to enter. Sometimes it's even for free for Jordanians and for local citizens. However, if countries tend to stay away from the Red Sea and the Dead Sea, and that's because of how expensive those places are, to be honest.
Okay.
Even us, as even like what do we call it, like middle class or upper class citizens, they prefer to have their vacation somewhere else just because it's with the same amount of money you could do so much more in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure what the reason is behind those high prices, but it's a bit too much. I had a friend coming over from Scotland
Mm-hmm.
and I took him to the Red Sea, and I booked a I booked a nice hotel, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we have a guest, we try to be as generous as we can be. And if you don't go for a decent or a luxurious hotel, then you won't get the same experience. It won't be the same. Maybe you won't have a sea view. Maybe your hotel won't be on the sea. Maybe if it doesn't have a sea, then you're missing out because the whole point of going to the Red Sea is enjoying the sea, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And the public beaches, it's a bit different from having a private beach and going to a luxurious hotel. So in order to guarantee the best experience for him, I booked a luxurious hotel, and that cost me around, and let's try and convert it here. So I'm gonna give a rough number because I can't remember the exact amount.
Okay.
So it's I'm just typing in. Sorry if guys could
No
hear. So
problem.
it's around 1,000 USD for 3 to 4 days.
Okay.
That's just for staying there. That's not paying for any of the activities. No jet skiing, no water sports, no diving, no. That's just the hotel
Mm-hmm.
and breakfast.
Wow. Okay.
So you can imagine, like, if you want to have fun, you want to spend money, but with the same amount of money, those $1,000, I could probably stay in Europe for around a week or a week and a half. And if I want to be really smart with it and go out for, let's say, not a family trip, because with family trips, you tend to spend a bit more just for the family's safety and to guarantee everyone is satisfied.
Mhm.
Let's say you're going out with your friends, easily 2 weeks with $1,000
Mhm.
in
Wow.
Europe.
Wow. Um, wow. So I guess I just
I'm
had.
sorry.
Mhm.
Sorry, like, tell me if I'm going off a tangent. I tend to do that sometimes,
No, no, no. This is good. Yeah, very interesting to hear
and it's
you
actually my
speak on
first
this.
time being interviewed. I've never been
Ah,
interviewed. I've
okay.
always been the person. I've always been the host on the High Low podcast. I've never been a guest, so I'm
Well,
excited about this
well,
opportunity.
you're doing a great job. I think listeners will find this very interesting. Um, I think one other thing that Americans haven't really had to deal with is inflation. And since the lockdowns during COVID, this is the first time a lot of people have been questioning, how is money created? Why are we paying taxes? I'm not used to, consumer goods going up in price. What is the inflation like, if there is any, in Jordan? And how do you guys deal with that challenge?
So the weird thing is, our currency is tied to the dollar. Okay, so
Okay.
whatever happens in the US is one way or another reflected in Jordan.
Huh.
So if interest rates go up, usually if the federal increase the interest rates, usually that's what happens here. You'll notice an increase in interest rates
Okay.
and vice versa. So when it comes to inflation, especially with the US currency being, I think, being the world reserve currency, it's whatever happens there is having an effect on us, and whatever is happening, with the war and with the war between Russia and Ukraine, or whether it was the political conflicts between the East and the West, it's certainly affecting the resources available, and it's definitely affecting the prices. Now, at least for the time being, I think it's still a bit under control. Like, it
Mhm.
hasn't reached the stage that Egypt has reached. I'm not sure if you know what happened in Egypt, where the economy, even though it is growing, which is something I don't quite understand. So if you explain it to me, I would be happy. So their economy is growing, however, their currency is going down, and each dollar is now worth. So
Less and
let's
less.
say, for example, yeah, the dollar used to be worth like 15 Egyptian pounds. Now it's like 30 Egyptian pounds. So it is being less and less, and people can afford less. In Jordan, it's still a bit under control. However, I think the entire world, and not just Jordan, they're experiencing now, with the increase in with the instability that we have, the increase in taxes, the increase, or we're witnessing more governments around the world failing, more banks, uh, I guess, being negatively affected by what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. But I guess, if I wanna sum it up, and if I wanna, like, try to be concise about this, it's the situation is getting a bit tougher. You are witnessing an increase in prices. You are seeing that it's now more expensive to go out to restaurants. It's more
Mhm.
expensive to do certain activities. So you start thinking about how you can save more money. So you tend to go out less. You tend to be more smart about how you spend and where you spend and on what you spend your money. Um, but it's only up to a certain point until the population, I guess, it starts to suffer. And I'm
Mhm.
talking here, I'm not talking specifically about Jordan, I'm just saying, mentioning things in
Yep.
general.
Mhm. I guess this is kind of, I guess this will be my closing question because we're almost hitting an hour. But have you noticed anything about Chinese investment in Jordan? I've been hearing a lot of people talk about how China's trying to, create all these trade routes and facilitate some of these peace deals. I think they just did something with Iran and Iraq after them kind of having disputes for a long time, and China kind of, I guess, help them come to some sort of agreement. Have you seen or noticed any sort of Chinese companies investing in infrastructure or anything like that in Amman?
No, I actually haven't heard about anything in Jordan. If there
Okay.
is and I've missed it out, then oh well, oops.
Mhm.
But I do know that they are playing a smart game and they're trying to secure their routes just to ensure that they have they're constantly exporting to the rest of the world, which is why they have the Silk Road built. And I think the Silk Road has been around for ages, but only recently they've been working on improving it and improving the infrastructure. And it goes through a lot of countries. I believe it goes through India, it goes through Turkey, definitely, and maybe through Turkey they're able to secure another port there, like having a port in Turkey.
Mhm.
So so I guess yeah, they are working in some sense on their infrastructure. They are working on securing their economy and securing themselves and having multiple maybe uh let's say paths
Mhm.
such that they always have a contingency plan. They always have a way to escape any pressure from any external like regulations or whatnot. But nothing in Jordan, to be honest. I'm not sure.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, I feel like I could ask you questions for a long time, but I think we'll wrap it up. And it's been so nice having you on. I think people are going to get a lot of value out of this. And why don't you tell them all about your podcast and where they can go find it?
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure being here, and it's again, thank you so much for the opportunity. I've never spoken that much in my life, and I'm so happy I did it. It's a way to release so much energy,
Yeah.
and it's a truly interesting topic. At first, I was a bit hesitant, just because I was scared that I was gonna get asked questions that I won't know how to answer. So I didn't want to put you or put me in this situation, but it was actually fun. It
Yeah.
was enjoyable. But yeah, so my name is Faysal Alkharaz, and I'm the host of the High Low podcast. You could always follow me on Twitter, and so my Twitter account, the podcast's Twitter account is at @thl_podcast. You could also find us on YouTube and Instagram if you just type the High Low podcast. It's a it's a blue logo that has like sound waves and the High Low podcast written on it. Um, you can follow me as well on Instagram. It's me personally, it's Faysal Alkharaz. Other than that, that's all. The podcast, it's available on more than I believe 8 platforms. The most popular ones are Spotify and Google Podcasts, so iTunes, and also iTunes. Soon will also be available on YouTube. We hope you guys, just show you the support that you want, and we're always happy to have feedback from you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Faisal. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Yep.